Okay, so let's talk a little bit about our greenhouse here. You can see this is the final model, and I want to show you a little bit of the design process for the end sort of made it, because this is probably the most unique model that we made with some of the processes. But originally, and I'll show you what the design looked like. This was a very early stage, or sort of like the first draft, and this one actually had the. I'll show you here. The top windows here, it actually had like a little bulb, like so. Almost like a bubble type of effect in the top. And I personally like the more flatter look. It looks a little bit more slick. It was looking a little bit more like bubble wrap, and that's something that I wanted to try to avoid. And then the other thing was the color itself, right? So we had the red, reddish sort of like terrain. We have sort of like the orange accents on the design. And I wanted to have something a little bit different that will contrast the reddish sort of warmer tones in the overall design of the environment. And so I went with green. Of course, it's a greenhouse as well, and the green goes really well complementary with the reddish sort of color. And so that's sort of like the bigger change that we made at the beginning to kind of bring a little bit of contrast into the design. And you can see that in some of the um, designs that we have for our buildings. The green goes really well against the red and the warmer colors, which looks really nice. And so that's sort of the main thing. But the other thing that we had to figure out is how much we're gonna see inside this pod, because this is a greenhouse, right? So there's gonna be like plants and stuff like that. And so even though we didn't want to see through the glass to the other side, we still wanted to give the idea, or at least to show that there's like plants and stuff and lights in there. And so we came up with the idea of making it into layers, right? So we have a little bit of opacity on the actual glass, right, that we can see through it. But if you look inside, we have some planes that we that Tucker did and put up there. And I'll show you how we made those in a second. But um, this way, it sort of gives it still has like a little bit of the 3D-ness, right, by the layering of the planes, but also keeps the model very light and easy to handle. And it gives like a nice sort of like effect into there. And so the way I made these, I made the actual graphics for this, right? And he sort of like put them up in layers here. The way I made this was that I went into 3D and I built up a very similar scene, like if I was in actual 3D, and sort of build it up in layers for them to take it into Photoshop and then have this layer system that I'll show you here. So for example, I have background, and I have all these different layers, right, that I can break up and hand them as regular PNGs, and then Tucker can actually put them in the model. And so the way I built this here was that I took some of the pieces that we already had for the kit, sort of build it up, and I'm building the site here as a almost orthographic view of this, so I can easily break it up into pieces. And I have all these different layers that are building up the space, right? And you can see I have some lights in there. I have some models with actual emissions, so you can get that shape of the light. And I have some plants and some lights. And so I rendered this in different layers, like you see here, right? So I can actually take it into Photoshop, break it apart if I need to, and then hand them as individual layers. And so after that, it's just a matter of adding the layers as planes in the model, and then just position them as needed. But this was the sort of process, and this is a very simple um, process that will save you a lot of time because it doesn't make the scene heavy, but it gives you the effects that you want for this. Now, of course, if we were to have this that you had to come inside with your character, of course, we'll have the actual models of all of this in here. But for this particular case, we only see this from the outside. And so we only need the illusion of what this looks like from the outside. Um, but the great thing about this is that this effect or this technique that you see here with the planes, you can use this for. This is a very similar technique than for the clouds that we did for the very first scene that we have. Is the very same technique. Is just used in a very different way. So again, is the layering part of it and the process um, of playing with the different designs and layers, right? We didn't want to have too many layers, right? Just a couple, but still gives you the effect that we wanted for this. So I hope that helps on this particular case. Again, a great technique. I use it all the time for most of my projects. And I'll see you guys in the next video.